How did America get into its budgetary meltdown? Our guest has the answers. Stay tuned.
This is the Vernuccio-Novak Report with Frank Vernuccio and Daria Novak. We are broadcast worldwide on the AM/FM 247.com network and also on radio in Las Vegas, Nevada, 1520 AM and 107.1 FM, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, 1640 AM and 102.1 FM, Tampa, Florida, 1630 AM and 102.1 FM, Macon, Georgia, 810 AM and 98.3 FM, and Boulder, Colorado, 100.7 FM. We welcome our new audience on the great WNJC on 1360 AM in Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey, and the Restore America Network.
Daria, it's good to be with you again.
It's always good to be here with you.
If I may, I'd like to make a personal note at the start of today's show. We live in a complicated world. The great minds of the 21st century gather in the halls of government, the ivy-covered buildings of universities, on the electric airwaves like us, and in scholarly journals to debate the ultimate questions of the universe. They seek to find the answers to the riddles that, despite all our advances in science and learning, continue to haunt humanity. What is the meaning of life? What is right and wrong? Why are we here? Mary Vernuccio, my mom, passed away last week. She did not attend college. She did not have access to the rich and powerful. She did not debate with professors or pundits. If you asked her to interject her views on the great philosophical issues, she wouldn't respond. And yet, she had the answers that geniuses all lack. The meaning of life is to love one another, to make this a better world for our children and grandchildren. What is right is when we respect each other as independent and unique human beings. What is wrong is when we seek to injure or dominate each other. She did not have to research these concepts or debate them because her understanding of these beliefs was instinctive in every fiber of her being. She was a quintessential American mom. In so many ways, she understood humanity's great thinkers far better than the writers, the theologians, the learned literati. She comprehended the bold assertion that the greatest of the commandments is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. She operated under the profound principle so eloquently stated in America's founding document that all men are created equal and all are endowed by the Creator with unalienable rights. The lives of everyone she touched, especially her family and friends, have been made infinitely better because of her. So too, our world has been made infinitely better thanks to America. Just as I am proud to have called her mother, we should all be proud to call ourselves Americans. It's time for those, even within our own borders, even among our own leaders, who inexplicably apologize for this great nation and appear to despise all that this blessed country has achieved and is, to finally acknowledge that reality. Thank you.
You know, Frank, I think that your mom was part of the greatest generation, and they were a special generation that had been through so much. My mom will be 89 this September, so she lived through the Great Depression, World War II, and they had a great deal of respect for the country, even when they argued and they didn't agree with it, and they had a great deal of respect for standing up and doing what was right. That was just born
and
in them.
You know what's unique? They... That generation, in their youth, they went through the Great Depression. Then they went through World War II. They were the leaders of the Civil Rights Movement. Put men on the moon, stared down the Soviets eventually. They achieved so much. And, you know, as John Kennedy said in 1960, they didn't ask what their country could do for them. They asked what they could do for their country. They bequeathed us this country that was so strong, that has so much promise for the future. I shudder every time I listen to someone like a Barack Obama basically despise and apologize America. To weaken this country that has so much to offer the rest of the world. You know, economically, we'll be talking about the budget later on. But when you think that in every great recession, and even the Great Depression from the 1930s till now, it was the American economic engine that pulled us out and pulled the whole world out of these doldrums because the free market was allowed to function. In this last recession, we put clamps, we put a holder on that free market. The president spent a huge amount of money, practically doubling the national debt. The president put capitalism in a vice, basically, and that's why we haven't recovered. And if we look at the storm clouds of war gathering from one end of the planet to the other, a result of America weakening its armed forces, of America pulling back, of America rejecting its leadership role, we have so much to learn from the great generation, and yet it seems our leaders right now are ignoring all the lessons that they should have gleaned from them.
You know, Frank, I really truly believe that, as we know, culture means the sharing of knowledge from one generation to the other. That as long as we have some of those people from the greatest generation, I'll call them, alive, able to translate information to you, to me, to others, that we can teach the younger generation about this country, what's really important. Yeah. I really think that we still have great hope here that we can get this done. Our economy, while we have all kinds of problems, is still the largest in the sense of, I think we're about 5 times larger, I guess, than really any other economy.
It's kind of like a couch tiger just waiting for that door to be released so it can jump out. But our government keeps holding it back more and more. I mean, the latest nonsense gambit, the president wants to basically take coal out of the energy equation, which would jack up the price of energy for everybody.
It would be absolutely ridiculous to do that, too, because we're also not requiring other countries to play on the same field in the same way that we are, economically speaking. So when you tell another nation that they don't have to abide by certain labor standards or environmental regulations or banking or intellectual property, it's unbelievably difficult for this nation to compete then. And I think that we're going to see some big changes take place in 2016 with the new administration. So I know we have a great deal of problems, but I really have hope because I hear so many Americans today talking about the fact that this is not right. They recognize that while Washington's trying to put out good economic numbers for employment, the reality is we have the smallest workforce in decades. You know, people know the difference when you go to buy a quart of milk at the grocery store and you're paying a couple of dollars more than what you were a year ago. No matter what the government says, people aren't believing it. So I think that we are still that strong nation inside. We just have to get our government in order.
Well, one area of the economy that we can look at, and we talked a little bit about this in the past, but there are a bunch of numbers we should look at again, is manufacturing. Now, of course, the presidential silly season is upon us again.
I like that. Presidential silly season.
And, of course, one of the candidates is Hillary Clinton, who proclaimed herself co-president with Bill Clinton back during his reign. Well, let's look at one of the things that Bill Clinton did. In the year 2000, President Clinton, over the objection, by the way, of an interesting conglomeration of conservatives, human rights activists, and union members, interesting grouping there, begged President Clinton not to sign an agreement with China, which guaranteed China most favored nation status without having to come back and ask for it each and every year. The president ignored that, and he signed it anyway. The Chinese, who of course do not have to comply with minimum wage standards, with environmental standards, their environment is a disaster, immediately began whole-scale manufacturing on a greater scale than they've ever done before, and basically undercut the West in how they can manufacture goods. Since that time, U.S. manufacturing has been in a state of crisis. The January 2015 report from the Federal Reserve notes that there are fewer jobs in that industry than at the start of the Obama presidency. When Obama became president, there were 12,561,000 manufacturing jobs in the nation. By January of this year, there were only 12,330,000, a drop of over 200,000. Now, of course, the crisis had its antecedents long before President Obama took office. It had its antecedents in what President Clinton did. But we look at how this continues to hold back the American economy. It's not a level playing field at all. When our manufacturers have to comply by environmental regulations, even though they might be good regulations, some of them, when they have to comply by worker safety regulations, even though those regulations might be good, But their competitors overseas don't have to do that. They can pay slave wages. They can treat their employees like slaves with no health and safety requirements. How are people going to compete?
You know, that's a really big concern for us, too, because as the Chinese economy matures, they are moving from creating that simple plastic product up into more high-tech products. They need the global market to trade, to sell their products. Their domestic market isn't large enough yet to sustain them in that sense, to keep that high rate of growth. And we're already seeing some of the Chinese growth rate drop a little bit. So that means that they need to participate, and they also want to, in the international marketplace. If they are doing that, that immediately is leverage for this administration, for this country, to say to the Chinese, you will reform your banking, your stock market, your insurance, intellectual property rights, even, whether it's human rights or other issues, whatever linkage politics are good or not good to put together, we have a whole basket of things that we could do with China. I don't see any of that being done right now. All I see are regulations coming out of Washington that are hurting American businessmen. They're hurting American farmers or small businesses that can't, with taxation, even turn their businesses over to family members of the next generation.
That's you bring up a fantastic point, because a lot of the debate about the death tax, the estate tax, has been, well, you're giving tax breaks to millionaires and so forth. But let's look at the reality of it. Those so-called millionaires might be the mom and pop who own the candy store down the block, who just want to pass that store on to the next generation. Very, very significantly, it includes almost what's the small number of American family farms that are left.
Right.
Those farms, the people who own them, the families that own them, own the land, but they don't have a lot of cash. What happens is, to pay that estate tax, that family has to sell the farm.
So you're really forcing American families off of the farms, and what are you bringing in? We bring in global farming operations. Our farmland has been picked up by Great Britain, by Saudi Arabia, and other places. It's just absolutely unbelievable what's happening to the American farmer.
Now, let's combine that with something, because I think it's interesting. Since President Clinton and his co-president, Hillary Clinton, happily signed that deal with China in the year 2000, 5.7 million manufacturing jobs in the United States have been lost. So, we have a combination of good union jobs going out the window thanks to the Clintons, combined with those whatever's left of the small family farms being sold out to the big corporate interest. Now, explain to me how the Republicans are the party of big business, but the Democrats are supposedly for the people. There has never been a more anti-union, anti-worker move than what was done by Bill Clinton in the year 2000. And yet, you don't see any discussion of that. You still see the nonsense, well, the Republicans want to get rid of the estate tax. They're the guys who are looking out for the millionaires. It just doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't, and in order to get this information out, there's very few shows like ours that are out there across the U.S. talking about these issues. The reality is the media's got to put it out there, and they're not. And we're seeing a lot of bias in academia, bias in media, and this information, it disappears, just like those emails did from Hillary Clinton. I mean, we're at a point now in this country, I think, where we have some choices to make. We can either stand up and call out the government or call out the Clintons for what they're doing, or we can just back down and literally say, you know what, I accept us becoming a socialist/communist country, big nanny state where, I make less than the government makes off of my labor.
Right. I got it. You mentioned Hillary. We both mentioned Hillary Clinton, and I got a kick the other day. It's been reported that Hillary's